Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question about actually a myth that has come up in the last couple of years of, should I avoid consuming carbs immediately after I train because I heard it can blunt muscle building hormones being released that you release from training. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this. All right, where did this myth originate? The first time I heard this was after pro bodybuilding trader George Farah got up and said that the way that he was training Kai Green, or it might have been Kai Green saying that's what George had him do, or something like that. But I do believe it was George Farah who started this myth. And again, you guys need to remember, be very, very careful in listening to these pro bodybuilding trainers. A lot of them come up with insane, crazy horseshit. And there's a couple things going on there. Sometimes these guys intentionally say crazy things so that their competitors and people they compete with will do really stupid, crazy shit to mess them up so that they can maybe have an advantage. All right, that has been done in that community forever. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger had admitted he used strategies like that to psych people out and give bad advice and bad information. Number two, what's he talking about there? Basically, he was saying that the insulin response from consuming carbohydrates post-workout can blunt secretion of human growth hormone. You release human growth hormone during training or right after you train, and the presence of insulin can blunt your body's release of this hormone, this anabolic muscle-building hormone. All right, there's some problems with that because he has people take protein instead, just protein without carbs, so that they get an anabolic response from that. All right, few issues with what he's actually saying. Problematic, straight up front. Number one, all these pro bodybuilders, including the guys he trains, are all on human growth hormone. When you're injecting exogenous hormones in your body, why in the fuck do you care about your body producing them? When you're injecting 5 or 10 or 20 times the amount the human body can produce under the best conditions, why do these guys care about this? Because you see that all the time. You see all the time talking about boosting testosterone from doing whatever style of training and stuff that a lot of bodybuilding coaches would talk about. Well, your guys are all on testosterone. They don't produce any testosterone. None, because they're suppressed from the stuff they're taking. So nothing you do is going to make them produce any. So why do you care about this stuff? They care about it because it sounds good, and people hear the terms like testosterone, growth hormone, IGF-1, all these hormones, and they associate them with muscle growth, even though they're produced in small amounts by the body. But they always try to convince people that hormone manipulation is a big deal in the body because when you use exogenous amounts, more than the body produces, all sorts of crazy things happen, right? So clearly anything that manipulates production does, but that's not actually the case. Sitting around worrying about transient shifts in hormones has never been found to be particularly useful for muscle growth, fat loss, fat gain, anything like that. It actually doesn't matter that much. The amounts the body fluctuates in responses to training, diet, whatever, they don't make much difference. They really don't. So he's talking about that, a substance that he probably has his athletes already using. So the amount your body produces is inconsequential. All right, the next big problem with this statement, stop and think about this for a second. Instead of consuming carbs, he has them consume protein shakes, whey protein, with almost no carbs in it or zero carb whey protein, because he doesn't want an insulin response. Protein shakes have an enormous insulin response even when there's no carbohydrates there. All right, protein has an insulin response. Fast absorbing proteins have a very fast insulin response. So even if he was concerned about insulin blunting growth hormone, he's still giving them something that's going to produce a large insulinogenic response. All right, the insanity of this statement, it goes to show how little these guys actually think or how little they actually know. I mean, really, you're going to care about someone's production of a substance that you already have them injecting, so what they're producing is inconsequential. You're going to make a big deal about meal timing based upon that when they're already injecting it. Number two, you're going to have them consume something that still produces an insulin response, a large one, because you don't want an insulin response from a different food. Maybe George Farah doesn't actually know, maybe a lot of these coaches don't actually know that protein shakes produce an insulin response, a very significant one. It's almost as high as carbohydrates. Maybe they don't know this. I think that's a pretty good guess. I think a lot of them really don't know this because they really don't know that much about nutrition, the human body, anything else. They really don't. It's downright scary sometimes. What they do know how to do is pump drugs into people. And that's usually what bodybuilding coaches for top bodybuilders are. They're usually drug experts. That's where they excel because that's what really matters the most. That actually matters more than the diet and the training does. That's really what matters at the end of the day the most for these guys. And that's just reality. But the other thing there is that as far as insulin itself blunting growth hormone, that's not really the case. That really isn't the case. In fact, the growth hormone that you produce from training and through the day is actually pretty inconsequential. The majority of the growth hormone that your body produces happens while you sleep at night. All right? It happens while you sleep at night. You don't actually produce very much of your growth hormone after you train. That's, again, a pretty tiny amount of the growth hormone that you produce. It's the growth hormone you produce while you're sleeping. And guess what? What hormone has been associated with growth hormone production? Melatonin. All right, when melatonin levels go up, growth hormone production goes up. What do we know causes melatonin production? Insulin, blood sugar. Actually, it's been noted that one of the reasons people get really sleepy after a big holiday feast, people always thought it was tryptophan. Tryptophan's in all your proteins. Tryptophan's really common. It's not tryptophan in the turkey after a Thanksgiving dinner that makes you sleepy. It's the carbohydrate loading. It causes your body to then produce melatonin after the insulin response. Melatonin is your body's sleep hormone. When melatonin goes up, it also causes your body to produce more HGH. And this is, again, you produce most of this while you sleep at night. So actually, consuming carbs before bed would hypothetically give you the highest amount of growth hormone, but it's not going to matter much. It really won't, but that would in theory do it. But, then again, so would taking melatonin before you go to bed. So this stuff is nonsense. People get into all this nonsense, and here's the worst part of it. People actually think that growth hormone production from training affects muscle growth. You know what? It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. People worry about hormones too much, so much so that this has been studied heavily because, top coaches around the world need to know this for every sport. The last meta-analysis, and I believe I don't have it handy, it should be easy for anyone to find because I did a video on this about 2 years ago. I believe it was 2014 or 2015, a meta-analysis came out that looked at over 20 wide-scale studies, different studies in different environments to see if there was any trend in correlations between hormones produced from training and actual muscle growth. And they looked at several different hormones. And you know what they found? They found that the amount of growth hormone and the amount of testosterone that a person produces as a result of weight training immediately after the training session, when they pull blood work to see who had the highest levels, it had no correlation with the amount of muscle growth that was there. Meaning that everyone produces a little growth hormone and testosterone after you train. But what was found is that the amount that you produce had no correlation at all. There was no correlation between the amount of muscle that people gained from training. None. It didn't matter. When they looked at wide varieties of individuals and looked for trends and patterns, because some people produce more or less than others, people gain muscle at different rates than others, they found no correlation between growth hormone or testosterone post-workout and the amount of muscle gained. The only hormone they found a correlation with was cortisol. All right, and this is interesting because how many times do you hear about a supplement or a product intended to blunt cortisol production from training because people are scared? Cortisol is going to break down muscle tissue. It's going to break it down. That's what they're concerned about. And they try to blunt it, but what was found in the study was that there was a correlation between the amount of cortisol produced immediately at the end of a workout and the amount of muscle you gain. So people who produced a little more cortisol gained a little more muscle. Do you know why? Because they trained harder. They did more total work. They worked more big muscles. It's not that they trained harder they did more curls or something. They did more total work. They trained harder, more muscles, more muscle fibers were involved. So therefore it produced a larger catabolic response. Well, muscle growth as far as this stuff is concerned is that everything is about finding balance in the body, homeostasis. So what happens is that when you disrupt large amounts of tissue proteins, there's cortisol involved with that, because cortisol is a hormone that helps disrupt tissue proteins. It breaks muscle tissue down. I'm not saying it rips it apart like people think of with tearing, but it disrupts the tissue proteins. It tries to break them up to get glucose and stuff from them. So what happens when you disrupt tissue proteins enough that extra cortisol is produced, your body realizes, oh my gosh, muscle protein is being broke down, and I need this muscle because my muscles are going to get injured from this training. I better produce more muscle tissue to fight against this catabolic response from the training. And it ends up giving a larger anabolic response, a larger anabolic signal from it. So the reality is the only hormone that we have found a correlation with from training and muscle growth is the one that everyone's scared of, the one that signals that's muscle tissue breakdown. Cortisol does break down muscle tissue. But because the cortisol is breaking down muscle tissue as a training response, your body responds in the other direction by building more muscle tissue. All right, it gives you a stronger anabolic response after. But the amount of the actual anabolic hormones produced from training don't seem to affect muscle growth at all. So this whole concept of sitting around saying, no, we need to avoid carbs post-workout because it could blunt muscle growth is absolutely fucking insane. It is absolutely fucking insane and goes against everything that we know from exercise science and sports nutrition going back for generations. It's not grounded in truth. It's not reality. It's just complete weird pseudoscience made up bullshit by some bodybuilding coaches. It's not real. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.